Hello learners, in this session we shall be talking about the fourth unit in the course MGPE 009, namely Gandhi's vision of a global order. My name is Dr. Shubhangi Vaidya and I am an Associate Professor in the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies at IGNOU. The aims and objectives of this lecture are to understand the backdrop of the rise of the modern nation state and then to look at Gandhi's critique of the world order and his vision for change. The basis of the contemporary global order is that of the nation state. The modern state is a phenomenon that has arisen primarily in Europe and thereafter spread all over the world. When we talk about the rise of the modern state system, we see that it was the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 which granted sovereignty to every state, which in a sense is seen as the precursor of the entire era of the modern state. However, there are major impediments to the idea of the state. States enjoy equality of status, but they are unequal in wealth and power. They exist within a shared environment without the benefit of either a common government or a commonly agreed upon set of rules. To consolidate their sovereignty and to strengthen their power base, states have often resorted to armed conflict, thus disturbing a peaceful order. As mentioned earlier, the Treaty of Westphalia brought to an end the 30 Years' War in Europe. It confirmed the fact of the rise of modern states and signaled the beginning of an entirely new pattern of interstate relations in Europe. And this speeded up the process of globalization, which subsequently promoted interconnectedness of states across the globe. The vigorous pursuit of national interest tends to disturb peace, which in turn necessitates the creation of a trans-state mechanism for maintaining peace. We see this everywhere in the world around us even today. The Treaty of Westphalia treated European nation states as the society of states and the nation state as the supreme principle of the political organization of humankind. And the society of states recognized the equality of status to all states, even while they were unequal in wealth and power. So this is a fundamental flaw in the idea of the nation state. In order to secure their sovereignty, nation states could legitimately use force when faced with external aggression. And agreements between states for mutual advantage were to be treated as sacrosanct, and the promotion of cooperation between states to facilitate political, strategic, social and economic domains was felt to be necessary. And these rules were expected to make the society of states a self-regulating system. A number of difficulties arise when we speak of the creation of a global order in terms of states. The society of states, as we have mentioned before, was not free of complications and the balancing of interests. Recurrent conflicts and contestations have been seen throughout world history. We see that the French Revolution, followed by the Napoleonic Wars and the Congress of Vienna in 1815. We see the Marxist movement after the First World War and the creation of the League of Nations. And the fascist and Nazi movements, spearheaded by the rise of lower middle classes, leading to the Second World War and the establishment of the United Nations organization. So all these developments basically signal that various conflicting sets of aspirations really challenge the idea of the nation state. And these contestations and conflicts led to various upheavals, led to various scenarios in which the world order had to be reinvented or revisited from time to time. A very, very important factor that has to be taken into account is the entire colonial encounter. The colonization of non-European parts of the world and the expansion of economic activities across state borders further complicated the historical situations that we have just discussed. As you know, colonization meant the exploitation of natural resources of the colonies for raw materials and for opening new markets for finished goods. The colonial encounter also had a civilizing mission, which aimed at civilizing colonial populations who were viewed as primitives to be recast in the image of the Western Christian man as the model of humanity. This is frequently known as the white man's burden. So apart from the economic exploitation that colonialism undertook, there was also this notion of changing the primitive, making the primitive fit to be a member of the world community. And this civilizing mission to make the primitive a human being in that sense, having the same values, having the same ways of looking at the world as the white man, this was known as the white man's burden. The term that we frequently use is Eurocentrism. The entire Western philosophy, Western ideas and institutions, Western liberal democracy, these were seen as the epitome of the perfect society. And Eurocentrism mandated that all societies were to embrace the Western liberal institutions of economic and political life and relations. So in a nutshell, the ideal world society was deemed to be one based on the Western notion of the nation state and Western ideals, philosophies, and worldviews. Let's speak about state sovereignty and the global order. We see that the state system has in fact proved a limiting factor for the emergence of a global order, as it puts hurdles in the path of orderly conduct of interstate relations. The great powers, the so-called great powers, used and sacrificed smaller states for promoting their own objectives, leading to the growth of nationalism and raising demands for self-rule in different parts of the world. Hierarchy and unevenness are also very, very important aspects. We see that it is the position of a state in the hierarchy of states that determines its place in the international division of power and labor and its ability to muster support in the community of nations. When the world is moving towards integration and the idea of a global village, is the division of the world into nation states with their own interests a barrier to the emergence of a unified and cohesive world community? This is a very, very important question that has troubled thinkers, political scientists, philosophers, because we see that the conversion of the society of means into a society of ends requires that the pursuit of national interest should take a backseat to the common interest of all the states. So what are certain basic human values? What are certain basic human aspirations that transcend or go beyond the ideal or go beyond the limits of the nation state? These are some extremely important questions. The nation state as a model of a world state is, according to many thinkers, a questionable one, as it is at the root of the problems facing the creation of a world order. What did Gandhi feel about the notion of a world order? In fact, what sort of a world order did he imagine? The point of departure for Gandhi's prescription for order in the world is his critique of industrial civilization, which according to him has been made possible in a world which is hungry for wealth and has engaged in a greedy pursuit of worldly pleasures. The concern for bodily comfort, Gandhi notes, takes note neither of morality nor of religion. And in order to secure one's comforts, one's luxuries, one's greeds, violence becomes an easy option. And the maxims of might is right and the survival of the fittest are resorted to. So when human beings are in this race to acquire when they are in the race to consume, then other human beings also become victims. Gandhi, of course, needless to say, would prefer peace and harmony instead of discord. According to Gandhi, the true well-being of humans needs to be grounded in a feeling of brotherhood and reforming the basis of the industrial civilization itself. The industrial civilization as we know it is based upon the primacy of the individual striving to gain certain goods, to gain certain ends for himself or herself. However, Gandhi's conception was not of privileging the individual, but rather the feeling of common belongingness, of brotherhood, of community. Gandhi in fact calls for a restoration of the connection with shared community and an active consciousness of the oneness of life. For him, this also means a firm commitment to truth and non-violence. Very importantly, awareness of the plurality of perspectives, the multiple ways of looking at the world from which reality can be seen, helps to develop in us the attitude of refraining from imposing our own vision of the truth on others. And this is something which is even more required in today's world than at any other point of time. According to Gandhi, the principle of ahimsa is violated by hurt, by every evil thought, by undue haste, by lying, by hatred, by wishing ill of anybody. It is also violated by our holding on to what the world needs. This is such an important injunction to the world, that ahimsa is not just violence as we conventionally understand violence. Violence also takes place when we think evil thoughts, when we lie, when we cheat, when we wish ill of anybody, and also by trying to possess or trying to keep something that is actually needed by those apart from our narrow circle, things that the whole world needs. And for Gandhi, the knowledge of the highest truth is the aim of self-development. So self-development is not just about material acquisition, it is a much more profound spiritual goal. He underlines the necessity of harmonizing oneself with an ever-enlarging network of relationships that makes society a network of extended selves. So it is not just the individual self, but seeing the self in the other, of extending a feeling of communion, of belongingness, of brotherhood across human society. Humanity comes to be located in a highly complex network of interdependency, cooperation, and harmony. To be an active member of this network is to treat the world as a family, the very, very important concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is a family. All of us are bound up in webs of interrelationships, in networks in which we need each other, in which we can come to the assistance of those who are in need of us, and be connected in a way that is above and beyond just material needs or consumption. For Gandhi, truth and non-violence are the necessary foundations of a global village. We've spoken about the concept of a global village earlier, that globalization in the world today is pushing or is creating a situation where all of us are interconnected with each other in so many different ways. But this global village that Gandhi envisaged had at its core selfless action, especially for the deprived sections, to promote the awareness that one should not have what the poor do not or cannot. This once again is a very, very important concept, that to possess those things which others cannot, that others are deprived of, is also, in a sense, an act of violence. This helps in the minimization of wants and the acceptance of a simple lifestyle that will do away with the very basis of reckless industrialization. So the root cause, or the root, the very core of industrialization is accumulation, of producing more and more wealth, of accumulating more and more wealth. However, by the simple fact of minimization of wants, we can undercut the very basis, or we can undercut the very foundation that drives our reckless industrialization and consequently creates more violence in the world. A social order that is based on truth and non-violence, according to Gandhi, must reflect interdependence, and this is informed by the principle of Swadeshi. Let us see how Gandhi described the institutional structure of a self-governing society. For Gandhi, this must be the local community, comprising one or a group of villages. This should be a self-governing democratic republic endowed with necessary powers and authority to manage its own affairs. The village republic, which was so dear to Gandhi's heart, must reflect individual freedom and be informed by a sense of social responsibility. And according to him, real democracy means complete decentralization in the economic and in the political realm. For Gandhi, self-governing communities at whose heart stands the spiritually awakened individual will safeguard order in the world. So order, a global order, is not something which is a function of powerful nation states, each fighting to safeguard its own interests. For him, it is spiritually awakened individuals who will safeguard order and who will organize the political order in such a manner, or reorganize the political order in such a manner, that this kind of dog-eat-dog world that we live in can be done away with forever. With local communities managing their own affairs, the overriding importance of national government will be greatly reduced. So the whole notion of decentralization of power, decentralization of responsibility, is at the core of Gandhi's idea of order, of political order. To sum up, we see that for Gandhi, a dynamic democracy can grow only out of meaningful relations and spontaneous organization that springs amongst people when they come together at the local level to solve their basic problems by cooperation among themselves. If a world government is needed, it must be constituted by fully independent nations, ignoring the distinction of small and big nations. It must stand for common good and achieve general disarmament. Disputes must be settled peacefully. It may, of course, have a small international police force to maintain order in the absence of a universal belief in non-violence. So when non-violence in its true sense is achieved, there will be no need, in a sense, for the state to monitor or for the state to control people. Of course, we see that this vision certainly sounds utopian. However, given the kind of scenario that we are living in, given the kind of global problems that we see, this utopian vision too requires reflection. It requires a deeper thinking about the place of all of us in the world and the way in which we organize our world to serve our interests. Thank you.